Season 1 of Marvel Rivals is already out along with a new map and 2 brand new heroes. The Giga Chad, Mr. Fantastic and the very impressive Invisible Woman. God, I love women. A bunch of new settings that can help improve your performance have also been added to the game, along with a host of new hero buffs and nerfs that are going to massively impact the way you play these heroes. And in this video, I'm going to highlight the best settings and most important hero changes because you need to be prepared and know about them before you head out into competitive to try and achieve your ranked goal this season. With that being said, hello everyone, my name is Dark Hero and let's get started. Now first let's go over some of the new settings that are going to improve your overall performance. Now if you want to improve your overall FPS, there's actually a few new settings that are going to help you accomplish that very easily. By going to the display settings and disable the anti-aliasing and super resolution type, you'll be able to change the render scaling of the game. If you have problems with your FPS in Marvel Rivals, I recommend changing this on top of lowering all of these settings so that you can achieve a higher FPS. Just don't set everything to the lowest settings or you're going to get these Nintendo DS graphics. Now another very important setting that has been added to Marvel Rivals, and I think that most players will want to change this, you can access it by going here into the keyboard settings and you will now be able to turn off mouse smoothing and mouse acceleration. Prior to Season 1 of Marvel Rivals, this setting was on by default and the only way to turn it off was by modifying the game's files. Thankfully the developers added the option to disable this in-game, so if you dislike having mouse smoothing and acceleration, there you have it. Now another setting that can be especially useful for people that are in the higher ranks and a lot of players have been asking for, you can access it by going here into the social settings and you'll be able to enable the streaming mode, which is going to allow you to hide your player name from other players, so that if people recognize you from a previous game and they didn't like playing with you, well, they're no longer going to know who you are, so they won't antagonize you. And if you are in the higher elos, they're not going to ban your main character just because they recognize who you are. You can also hide other players' names, including your own friends list, and can also set up a delay for your queue if you choose to do so. But overall the game feels a lot more stable for just about everyone else, and with this setting you should be able to achieve some good stable FPS. That being said, let's move on to some of the biggest hero changes that are going to have a heavy impact on your gameplay, and some of these are absolutely crazy. And one of the most impacted heroes by all of these changes is without a shadow of a doubt Storm. Now despite Storm being a very low ranked character in the tier lists among all of the creators, she actually has a pretty good kit. It's just that her numbers were very low and needed some help. And now with all of these buffs, I actually end up fighting a Storm pretty much every other game, and whenever I do, they usually end up being the MVP. So what's the reason for this? Now funny enough, they didn't actually adjust the range of Storm's shift ability, which is this circle that you see around her that affects your teammates by either boosting their movement speed or boosting their damage. What they ended up doing was actually changing the way Storm's left click works by not only increasing the projectile speed, making it a lot easier for you to hit your targets, but also increasing the damage of the projectile. Additionally, they also boosted Storm's right click damage, and you gotta keep in mind of course that this ability can pierce through targets. And even though the changes for the damage numbers aren't all that high, you need to keep in mind that Storm is able to boost her damage with her shift, and then even more whenever she uses her E. So it actually ends up being a lot more damage that you can get out of this character. And as for Storm's ultimate, this was by far one of the best ultimates in the game. It is very powerful, letting you summon it pretty much whenever you want, and you can deal a ton of damage in an area that is always going to result in a kill, or at the very least you're going to get a defensive ultimate out of the enemy team. And now they've made it so that the bonus health that Storm gets out of using the ultimate is increased to 450, so she has 700 health by the time she uses the ultimate, and it's going to linger for a little bit longer because Storm is a long-ranged character, and whenever you need to ult you're going to get into the middle of the team fight, so the extra time that you have with the additional health is actually going to be very impactful. So again, despite these changes being seemingly small, I do believe that they're going to have a big impact on the meta, and I think that Storm is going to be a high tier hero. Now the next hero that I think has received a massive change is actually the Winter Soldier. Now when the game initially launched, people immediately put this character as an S tier hero, but as people got better, especially in the higher tiers like Diamond and Grandmaster, you don't really find Winter Soldiers getting a lot of resets on the ultimate, because whenever they ult they end up getting out of position addition, they end up diving the enemy team, they don't have a lot of HP, and the strategists can focus the heroes that have been ulted so that they don't die and that Winter Soldier gets the reset. And so this hero ends up losing a lot of value. However, these buffs end up making the Winter Soldier a much more viable character by not only increasing the bonus health that you get from your hook ability as well as your grenade, on top of increasing his base health from 250 to 275, but the devs have also made Winter Soldier more lethal by increasing his left click damage. Now that being said, he did receive a nerf when it comes to his ultimate. The radius of this circle for the ultimate has been reduced, and they have also reduced the damage decay whenever you use this. So they are essentially just trying to make you have to rely more on your regular abilities to deal damage with this character, to get the resets, rather than simply relying on your ultimate to do everything for you. Unless the enemies are very low health, you actually have to damage them to get the resets and then be able to use your ultimate again. Overall, I feel like this is a very nice change, and you are definitely going to be seeing a lot more of Winter Soldier. Now the next hero is one that I did not expect getting buffs, because I feel like what this change indicates is that the developers made this patch with the information and feedback that they got from players a couple of weeks into the game's release, and didn't really take into account the final weeks before the new update, because otherwise, why would they be buffing Wolverine? He's actually one of my favorite heroes, probably my most played duelist, and the thing about him is that people didn't understand how to play Wolverine when the game released, which is why everyone was saying that he was bad and they were rating him low on the tier lists. But when people figured out that he is actually a tank shredder, then he became massively popular because he is insanely powerful, to the point where in my Grandmaster lobbies I often see Wolverine being one of the banned characters, and that is prior to this update. And now Wolverine's base health has been increased from 300 to 350, which I think is going to make it so that Wolverine is going to be banned pretty much every single game, especially considering that both Hela and Hawkeye have been nerfed, so people will be less likely to ban those two heroes. Now the trade-off is that Wolverine's E, the Undying Animal buff that gives him damage reduction, has been reduced from 50% to 40%, but honestly I feel like this is just an insanely strong buff, and with all of the games that I have done so far in Season 1, Wolverine has always been dominating. So if you're not playing him, go ahead and learn him because he is going to give you a ton of value. Now just like with the previous hero, I also believe that this buff is pretty out of pocket, and that is Namor. Now the only direct buff that Namor received is that they have essentially made the ability to throw your ultimate and your creatures a lot more accurate, which is fine by itself, it's a nice quality of life change. However, Namor got a huge buff when he has the team up ability with Luna Snow. Now his team up is what allows him to spawn the frozen octopus that has more health than a regular one and actually applies a slow to your enemies. Well, they've gone ahead and not only increased the damage of the frozen octopus, but they have further increased its damage whenever they are in the berserk state, so that is whenever you land a headshot or hit an enemy with right click, and they have also made the slowing effect of the frozen octopus be increased by 5%. And I think that Namor is already a very powerful hero, as he can pretty much deny any divers that come your way, and can also be incredibly effective at shredding tanks. He's definitely one of the most popular heroes that I find in GM, especially when Luna Snow is not banned. And hey, if you are someone in the lower ranks that doesn't have great aim, you can always pick up Namor, and with some good octopus positioning, you're going to be dominating your games. Now this hero also got a pretty big buff, and that is Cloak and Dagger. Now the problem with Cloak and Dagger is that very often your teammates would leave your healing bubble or would not realize that you had used your ultimate, and they would not stand on top of it to get the massive healing. And thankfully that is exactly what the developers addressed with these buffs, as they have reduced the cooldown of Dagger Storm to 12 seconds, making it so that you're going to have a near permanent uptime with this ability, as the healing bubble lasts for 8 seconds. That by itself is already a very big buff. But then they also gave you a 4th dash on your ultimate, so you'll be able to cover a lot more distance with your ultimate to cover an area that gives healing to your allies or some small extra damage over time to your enemies. And thus you'll be able to take much more space with Cloak and Dagger, and that is going to allow your team to be much more offensive, take the point more easily, all of that with the massive range that you can cover with your ultimate. And remember that you can make this ultimate stand on top of each other, you can stack this on top, And so you're going to get a ton of healing in this small area if you decide to use it this way, making it so that you can pretty much survive anything whenever you use this. Now, I don't feel like Cloak and Dagger is going to be more valuable than a Mantis or a Luna Snow, or even Invisible Woman that has recently been added to the game. But in all of those matches where those heroes are banned, or if you just prefer to play Cloak and Dagger, she's going to be a lot more viable, and there's going to be less room for your teammates to screw you over. Now, Captain America is one of the heroes that received the biggest buffs, as he definitely needed them. You could make him work, but you were pretty much a worse Vanguard compared to everyone else in the game. And everything that he received is pretty much reduced cooldowns, increased health, and you have a lot less ult charge. And he also gets his ultimate about 10% faster, but I don't think that this is quite enough to make him a threat compared to all of the other Vanguards, especially since Venom also received a buff, which now gains 20% more health with his E, and his ultimate deals a little bit more damage. I don't think that these two Vanguards are quite going to stand out. Maybe Venom is going to be played more often in organized compositions where everyone is diving at the same time, but I don't see it quite shaking up the meta, because even though Doctor Strange and Hulk got slightly touched with a couple of nerfs, I do believe that they're going to remain meta. Now, Thor did actually receive a couple of buffs. Not only did they increase his health from 500 to 525, they have also made it so that he cannot be CC'd during his ultimate, which was one of the biggest weaknesses that he had. So even though his ultimate still is the worst part about him, he's going to be able to find more success. And I do believe that Thor is going to be played a little bit more often, and that is because of Hela. She actually got nerfed, as they have reduced her HP from 275 to 250, and they have reduced the seasonal damage buff from 20% to 15%. That being said, she still deals a lot of damage, and because now Hela is going to be a lot less banned, that means that you can more often play Hela together with Thor and get the team up ability active more often. And in the same train of thought, Hawkeye has also been nerfed, though he did receive a slight buff. They essentially reduced the distance for his passive that allows him to charge up his shots to deal more damage, and the same thing with Hela, they have decreased the seasonal damage bonus from 20% to 15%. But the trade-off is that they have reduced the spread angle between the blast arrows. Now, Hawkeye is still able to one-shot enemies, it just takes him a little bit more effort, as he needs to be a little bit closer to the enemies, which naturally puts him in danger. Additionally, he's going to deal less damage to tanks, so he's going to need to focus on the squishy enemies. And of course, nobody used the blast arrows, a lot of players didn't even know Hawkeye had that, but I think that he is still going to be a very powerful hero, just not quite as oppressive as he was. Now, one hero that got a massive nerf is actually Black Panther, as they have reduced the additional health that you get from using your dash ability and refreshing the marks that you apply. But on top of that, they have also decreased the maximum amount of health that you can get from all of these dashes from 120 to 75. So you are no longer going to be getting a Black Panther with over 400 health, and that's what was so good about him, because he was one of those assassins that could dive the backline by himself, and even though you might not be able to get a kill, because he has a base 300 health and is able to get so much additional health, it was always worth it for him to go in, maybe get 20 to 30% of his ult charge and waste some of the enemy's cooldowns, and good Black Panther players would always be able to live through it. That is going to be a lot more difficult to accomplish now, and I think that that is a much more impactful nerf than to nerf some of its damage. Now, one hero that I think has been understated in the way that he has been buffed is actually the Punisher. Now, the patch notes are very short. They have essentially just made it so that you are a lot more accurate with both your shotgun and your assault rifle with the Punisher. But on top of that, Punisher is also getting an indirect buff in the form of Rocket's team-up ability, as the cooldown of ammo invention for Rocket Raccoon has been reduced by 5 seconds, which I know doesn't sound like a lot, but that is an essentially 10% shorter cooldown. And in my opinion, Punisher is already a very powerful hero. He deals a lot of damage, can take up space with a turret, has 275 HP, and the Rocket team-up ability allows him to deal a lot more damage. I think this buff comes from a lot of players that maybe aren't as proficient with the game, just pick him up because he is a simple character, and so the hero's win rate is going to go down by a lot. Or maybe it's the case that in the lower elos you find yourself seeing Punisher go in with the ultimate by himself, and he just gets killed and gets no value out of it. Whereas in the higher elo games, where people are a lot more coordinated, his ultimate is actually insane, because you often get a Mantis player that is going to pocket you, give you a damage boost, and put all of her healing into you, so that the Punisher with the ultimate can deal as much damage as possible. So yeah, I definitely feel feel like the Punisher did not deserve this buff, and if you're not playing him, give him a shot, because he is definitely a good hero. Now the rest of the buffs I don't think are going to be quite as impactful. Black Widow definitely got a lot of buffs, but I still don't think that she is a good hero. I don't quite think it's going to change anything, and unlike Storm that also got a ton of buffs, I haven't seen a single Black Widow in ranked. Magic got a small damage buff to her E whenever she is in her ultimate form, but what she definitely needs is a shorter timer on the animation where she enters the ultimate and gets out of it, because that is her biggest issue. Moon Knight's buff has been buffed by increasing its radius by 20% and by also making it deal more damage. Salok's ultimate got nerfed, as it is now going to deal damage to barriers, as before Salok would ignore them and only target the heroes that don't have a shield. I don't think that quite changes much, especially as in the higher elos people already knew how to play against Salok's ultimate, and Scarlet Witch actually got a big list of buffs, but I also don't think that they are going to be quite as impactful. She's just basically going to take down the squishier characters a little bit quicker, but that's about it. Squirrel Girl now actually has an ultimate, as her squirrels that she summons will actually target an enemy after they bounce off a wall, so her ultimate is actually going to be useful. Rocket's healing has been increased but not by a lot, and Mantis's passive movement speed has been nerfed by 1 meter per second, which is actually a lot. It's about a 60% nerf on her movement speed, but because Mantis loses this movement speed the moment she gets shot, I don't think that this is quite a massive nerf. And this comes from someone whose most played hero in ranked is Mantis in GM with a 65% win rate. And Luna Snow didn't even get a nerf, which I think is absolutely crazy. They simply no longer allow you to quickly swap between the two different modes in your ultimate by just spamming the ultimate button. Overall, I feel like this patch has changed the game in a good direction, though some heroes like Wolverine should definitely not have been buffed. I feel like I won't be able to play him for a single game in ranked, because he's always going to be banned, and heroes like Luna Snow should definitely have been nerfed. But overall, I'm very positive about this, and we're likely going to get more patch notes like this in the middle of the season, so I'm not too worried about it. Let me know which heroes you guys are going to be playing, and I'll have a Mr. Fantastic and Invisible Woman guide in the future for you guys. With that being said, my name is Dark Hero, and thank you all so much for watching.